Okay. Oh, so this is going out on YouTube also. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait. I don't know, maybe Saurabh is here. Let us know when you're ready to start.
Yeah. Okay, so a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined this webinar. Today is a very special webinar for that to speak. Until now, we've only done it in a PPT only format. Today, we have with us two very distinguished guests from the world of money and markets. So we have with us Saurabh Mukherjea and Anupam Gupta. Now, a lot of you might know both of them individually. I mean, until recently, both of them had recently co-authored a book called The Victory Project, which we'll talk about in detail today. Now, Saurabh, as you know, he's a very, you would say, a frequent face that you can see on CNBC and a lot of channels today. And he's the CIO and founder at Marcellus Investment Managers. Earlier, prior to this, he was the CEO at Ambit Capital, and he's written bestseller books like Gurus of Chaos, The Unusual Billionaires, Coffee Can Investing, and until now, he's co-authored The Victory Project. Anupam, he again is a chartered accountant, and he's been in the industry for close to 20 years. He works as a investment research consultant. He hosts a award-winning show called the Paisa Vaisa podcast, which has done about 200 plus episodes, and you can like listen to most of his content, which is centered around money, markets, and personal finance. So while we're seeing a lot of people are still joining in now, without further ado, Anupam, like I'll just make you host, and we can straight away start with the presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot, Saket. Very kind of you. Good to be here. Good to interact with your audience, and thank you for having us over. Thank you for the kind introduction for me. So let's just start right away. We're going to present to you today the results of 2 years of research on the drivers of outsized professional success in highly competitive industries and professions. I'll just check to see if the screen is. So can you, has the presentation come online?
Yeah, no, not yet.
Not yet. Huh? Here you go. Here it is. I hope you can see this.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is the Victory Project is out in bookstores, whichever are open, and there are quite a few open, and it's available also online. It's basically the result of 2 years of research on the drivers of outsized professional success in highly competitive industries and professions. I'll begin the first half of this presentation, and Saurabh will join in for the second half. So let's get started. So we know the story that India's GDP has tripled. It has tripled in the last 20 years, and economic feat on a global basis, on a per capita basis, we are now at about just over $2,000 as compared to $600 20 years ago. So we've grown faster than any democracy has ever grown in the history of this planet. We've grown faster than any large country, with the sole exception of China. And as we know, all of this prosperity hasn't really produced happiness. Nearly half the marriages in our large cities are breaking down. Employees are insecure about their jobs in the industry. The banking system is in tatters with NPAs. Mutual funds barely manage to give, 5% returns over the last 5 years. And there is this there was always this general sense of despondency over the future, even before the pandemic had started. And so it's no surprise then that a Mumbai-based psychologist that we spoke to, Dr. Sharmila Banwat, said that she sees many people who can't figure out how to strike a work-life balance. They understand the concept but don't know how to implement it practically. So where is the problem? So our thesis is that at the core of the human mind's inability to find happiness, even after plenty of hard work and success, is basically the way that we are wired. If you look at the picture below on the extreme right hand side, some of you will see an old woman, some of you will see a young woman. I personally saw the old woman first before figuring out there's a young woman also um, out out there. So it's a very popular optical illusion. So, and talking of illusion, psychologists and cognitive scientists like Nick Chater, Stephen Sloman, and Philip Fernbach tell us that we essentially suffer from three illusions. The first is the knowledge illusion, the fact that we think we know everything, we know how an iPhone works, we know how a complex company like Reliance works, whereas in reality, we probably don't. We wouldn't even know, in some cases, how a zipper works or how a toilet flush works. The second illusion is that we think that we can multitask, but actually we can't. And one example of that is talking on the mobile phone while we are driving. There's enough research to show that even if you're using a Bluetooth headset in the car, there's still a lot of risk when you do that. And third is the visual illusion. For example, you think that when you're reading a book, you're seeing each and every word on the entire page, whereas at best, eye tracking software has shown that you're just focusing on 12 to 14 letters at a time. And if these three illusions weren't enough, there's a fact that our memories are also fallible. So we think we are remembering the past, whereas actually we're just putting pieces together in a story. If you want proof for that, well, uh, Nick Chater had done this mind-blowing experiment where he took a group of people, told them to close their eyes and visualize a tiger, and he asked them to really in detail, how do the stripes on a tiger flow? How do they flow on the tail, on the body, on the head, on the legs? And most of the people got it wrong. And on this slide in the middle of the slide, you can see a picture of a very beautiful Royal Bengal tiger and see how the actual stripes actually work. So you think that you know how what a what a tiger looks like, but you don't even know that. So all of this is so given the way that a brain is wired, how we survive so far, well, the brain makes its own shortcuts, but that's only surviving. How do we thrive? This is our thesis, that the simplicity paradigm is a three-tiered framework that starts from first principles of specialize, simplify, and spiritualize, goes up to more advanced skills of clutter reduction, creativity, and collaboration. And the top tier is the result of all your efforts and all your hard work, which is achieving outstanding results in business, in investing, and in life. So let's start with the first basic layer, specialization. So on specialize, we know that specialization works, whether it's Virat Kohli in cricket, Charlie Munger in investing, Steve Jobs in business, Shah Rukh Khan, Akshay Kumar, whoever. This last decade has seen the rise of the specialist, one person who's good at, really good at what he does. So the idea of specialization, though, was created more than 300 years ago by Adam Smith, but the recent focus on specialization can be traced back to Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, which talks about 10,000 hours of practice to master talent very early in your career. So one question that Saurabh and me keep on getting is, how do we start? What is this process about? For example, that what do we specialize in? So the answer to that is a very elegant framework by American author Robert Greene in a book called Mastery. But he says that you have to specialize in something that you love, something that innately appeals to you. So find that area first. Could take, that could also take some time. But once you find that area, go find a guru, a mentor, who has mastered the specific area and can guide you, and therefore give you shortcuts and share his knowledge. And once you've done step one, step two, and as your body of knowledge increases, you merge the rational part of of the knowledge that you have and the emotional part yourself to go into what's called the creative active mode. So examples of this kind of mastery are everywhere. You look at Charlie Munger of Berkshire Hathaway. Closer home, Ramdevji of Motilal Oswal is someone who's been featured in our book. So he's a great example of this level of specialization. He was very clear about two things very early on in his life. Remember that this is someone who's come from a very humble background, Raipur, then Nagpur, and then finally in Bombay. He was clear that he wanted to become wealthy, and that he wanted to become wealthy by investing. And he developed skills very early in his life towards achieving these goals. For example, whenever he would go to have tea or breakfast or his meal in the day, he would sit in a restaurant. He would have mapped out the entire floor of the restaurant, the number of tables, number of chairs, the number of people coming in, the time they spent there, the items they ordered, the staff that was there. I mean, what he was doing was he was building an entire P&L of the business right there, all in his head. Remember, this was a time where there were no laptops, no mobile phones at all. And then he would go and talk to the business owner about about the model that he had built, so that he could gain insight from him as well. as he went on developing that, he found a guru, a mentor in the form of Sanjay Bhattacharya, and then even later, uh, Ramdevji went and met Warren Buffett in Omaha at a time where traveling from India till there, or at least the Berkshire Hathaway wasn't as popular as it is today. A lot of people, in fact, do the trips for the annual meetings at Omaha. So that's specialization. So let's move to simplification. That's number two. So uh, simplification. See, we are all consumers of simplicity. Some of the largest products that we have, that we own, that we consume, whether it's the iPhone or McDonald's burgers, all of these are products that have simplified our lives. And look at the iPhone, for example. Probably costs about $500-$600, sells for more than $1,000. McDonald's is now a global franchise. It's made fast food ubiquitous all over the world. Or take even in the index funds that Vanguard launched all the way in the 70s, that's become so popular now. Or closer home, the concept of an SIP, investing identical amounts month after month. So these are all powerful examples of prosaic products that deliver simplicity in our lives. So delivering simplicity might sound really easy, but these products that have changed our life, creating them was anything but simple. The way to do this isn't there are two levels to doing this. The first is the basic level, simplicity through process, through habits. And the second is simplicity through principles. The first, simplicity through habits. We look at Krishna Devaraya, who was the dominant ruler of the Deccan, and by far the mightiest ruler the Deccan has seen some 500 years ago. His daily routine was legendary and as captured by Manu Pillai in his book. Every morning he drank, and I quote from Manu Pillai's book, every morning he drank a 3/4 pint of sesame oil, after which he anoints himself all over with the same oil. He would then work out with great weights, exercise with a sword, wrestle with one of his wrestlers till he sweats out the oil. He'd go horse riding before daybreak, and finally, when it was time to appear in court, he would wear a tunic, a brocade cap, and seat himself on the diamond throne. Now, you and I might not get to be an Indian Maharaj today, but extensive research shows that creating a routine is one of the most powerful keys to living a successful life. So then that was simplicity through process, through habits. If you look at simplicity through principles, a more advanced level of simplicity, if you look at the way Saurabh and his colleagues manage money at Marcellus, the approach is called the consistent compounders approach, where they refuse to invest in companies that don't deliver 15% growth in revenues year after year and 10% ROE year after year, not on a CAGR basis. Marcellus only focuses on these companies that deliver these results as central to maintaining that discipline in investing. So whether it's the iPhone or the McDonald's burger or the SIP or the index fund, once these products hit the market with runaway success, everyone says it was really easy to make. But actually, simplification through principles is the ultimate sophistication. That's it from my side. For the rest of the presentation, I'll hand it over to Saurabh. Thanks.
Thanks, Anupam. Thank you very much. And thank you, Saket, for hosting us. Just a quick clarification. Those two thresholds that Marcellus uses are a 10% revenue growth and 15% ROE or ROC as the cutoff for considering companies to invest in. So let's move forward. Let's finish off first on the final layer of the foundational layer of the simplicity paradigm. So the simplicity paradigm, foundational layer, Anupam's already discussed, specialize and simplify. I'll now discuss spirituality. Now, I confess it's very easy to be cynical about spirituality. And I also confess that I was a cynic until I became a professional investor a few years ago. That's when I realized that there are no future facts. There are no future facts that can help my colleagues at Marcellus look after the monies of thousands of people. Spirituality, in a way, becomes the bridge between our abilities and applying those abilities to the world around us. So let me be clearer about that. I don't know for certain what will happen when the market opens tomorrow, right? But rather than staying up tonight and fretting all night about my lack of knowledge of the future, I need to control my mind, my emotions, and stay as rational as I can. If I can get better at this, I'll be able to deal with greed, fear, with emotions generally far better than I can today. Right? Now, Ray Dalio is the most famous investor when it comes to articulating this point very clearly. In his famous book Principles, he says that the most valuable habit I've acquired is using pain to trigger quality reflections. If you can acquire this habit, you'll learn what causes you pain, what you can do about it, and it'll have an enormous effect on your effectiveness as an investor. Right? Now, like Ray Dalio, there's another American investor called Jason Voss. He's also used to be an American fund manager. Now he's an advisor to funds, and he's written a lovely book called The Intuitive Investor on this whole subject between the interplay between spirituality, meditation, and investing. Right. So his view in that book is spirituality helps us make better investment decisions. And Anupam and I spoke to him a couple of times on Skype when we were writing the Victory Project. So Jason said that, look, meditation not only helps in relaxation and improving focus. That's, I think, quite well explored territory. There's been plenty written about how meditation helps in relaxation and focus. He made it a deeper point. He said that it also helps you understand that your family, your colleagues, and your friends' happiness is actually far more important than your own, right? In simple terms, his view was the way you should think of meditation, it helps you heal your mind and lets you perform at a higher level of mental intensity for far longer than you would otherwise, right? So just to quote from Jason's book, from The Intuitive Investor, meditation techniques are the polishing techniques. Meditation practices are the polishing techniques that help you be the best. You need to find the tools and techniques that exalt your consciousness. Once you discover what makes you and your talents unique, and that's only found through spirituality, then all of a sudden magic happens, right? Now it's a deeper subject. Intuitive Invest is the best book we've read, but we've given you lots of cross references, and I guarantee you that if you do want to succeed in any demanding task, I mean, I'm an investor, but I'm sure there are other people doing very demanding jobs on this Zoom call. Meditation is a big plus, right? I was reading Rahul Dravid's biography over the weekend. A lot of his success as a batsman seems to be down to mental conditioning techniques and meditation techniques. Now let's now move to the next level of the simplicity paradigm. We leave the foundational layer behind us now and move to the more advanced layer. And we start with clutter reduction, right? Why do we start with clutter reduction? Because even if you and I meditate every day, if you can't manage your tasks and your projects, your system will go into cognitive overload, right? So you, I, all of us, we have to make a conscious attempt to focus on what is really important for us. The question immediately arises, how do we know what is really important for us? When Anupam and I met Professor Sanjay Bakshi, the famous professor at MDI in Delhi, we met him at the Lodhi Hotel in Delhi to interview him for the book. This was around a year back, right? The meeting lasted for over 2 hours. Professor Bakshi is a big believer in the idea of intense focus, cutting off all distractions to spend quality time on a single idea. He not only did that, he showed us his the home screen of his phone. There were no notifications. It was a black screen, right? It was the first time I had seen it, at least. Throughout our meeting, his phone did not beep up or light or ring even once. And in those 2 hours, right, he gave us some of the deepest insights into fierce focus that I have received in my career, right? In chapter 3 of the book gives you what we learned from this celebrated investor in Delhi. Now, Cal Newport has written 2 outstanding books on this subject of deep focus, and studying the lives of business legends like Harsh Mariwala in India has shown us that there is a step-by-step process to reducing mental clutter. That process begins by being very clear about your goals, right? Once again, for me to say you should be very clear about your goals, it's simple to say, but it's not easy to do. An example of clear goal setting is one that a fellow fund manager in California gave me last year. He told me, I focus on very few things: my family, my investors, and my closest colleagues. I deprioritize everything else. Now, once you have that sort of crystal clear clarity on your goals, you then move towards building prioritized checklists to help you with the execution. So step 1 is getting the goals sorted. The execution part is checklists, and who better to turn to than Atul Gawande and the Checklist Manifesto, probably the best book, at least the most accessible book written on the subject of checklist. Now, why are we going on and on about this whole subject of clutter reduction? Because there's a lot of very credible research which shows that memory plays a key role in creativity. And memory in turn is juiced up if your mental clutter is reduced. So less clutter, more enhanced memories, greater creativity, right? And this link is one of the most celebrated links in psychology: decluttering, memory enhancement, and creativity. right? And there's something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve that we came across whilst researching the book that you might want to look up. It gives you the link between these three abstract concepts. So that's clutter reduction. Let's move to the engine room of outside success. Let's move to creativity. Now, in a highly competitive free market economy, and by the way, whether anybody likes it or not, we are in a highly competitive free market economy. The socialist Raj is by and large gone, other than for those who are involved in politics and public sector life. For the rest of us, it's a dog eat dog, highly competitive free market economy. In such an economy, even if your ideas are marginally better than those of your peers, you'll be in high demand. So original thought, right? Creative thought is the key driver of wealth and success in our world. The question then becomes, well, how do we produce genuinely original content, right? Not the sort of, the copy paste from social media, WhatsApp and so on. How do we produce genuinely original content? Now, again, psychologists have done plenty of research on this across the last 50 years. And, psychologists across generations, Adam Grant from our generation, Doris Wallace and Howard Gruber from the preceding generation, the list of things that drives creativity actually is surprisingly uniform, right? So the first item on that list of firing up your creativity, first item is read widely, right? Charlie Munger famously has said that he's never met a smart person who does not read widely. Every expert Anupam and I interviewed for this book, every single expert we interviewed for this book turned out to be a voracious reader, right? And for my part, I ask almost everyone I meet what their favorite books are. I create a sort of great big long running list on my battered phone. And then every Saturday I sit here with a cup of coffee and buy my books for the weekend. And I have to confess, a little bit guiltily, I admit, I have to confess I spend all my free time reading. So that's the first driver of creativity, heavy duty reading. Second is exploring the world, right? Traveling extensively, meeting people from a variety of cultures and religions, right? Going through a range of experiences. Most of what I learned before I became a professional investor came from doing odd jobs as a teenager, backpacking holidays, friendships formed in the betting shops and bank branches where I worked in my late teens and early 20s. Right, that part of my life, that 7-8 years of doing in pretty much anything which could earn a little bit of money, was a big part of whatever I learned before I entered the world of professional investing. Third driver, memory enhancement, right? People who have developed the memories to a very high level have learned how to focus their attention on essential information. There are specific memory enhancing techniques which are worth learning. You can find them easily on the net. We've given you a couple in the book. This is stuff like Memory Palace, right? Illustrated in that celebrated Sherlock Holmes episode, illustrated also in The Mentalist, right? So Memory Palace is the most well-known one of them, but there are other memory enhancing techniques. It's very powerful. The link between creativity and memory is extremely well researched and well established, right? Fourth driver, work hard, produce lots of ideas, right? It's no surprise that almost all the creative giants have a high output rate, right? In the book, we've discussed celebrated movie director Satyajit Ray. He directed 36 movies in a 35-year career and finally got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Academy in Hollywood. Whilst we were doing one of these webinars, we heard from someone in Hong Kong that Woody Allen, again, similar output rate, one movie a year for 35 years, and 22 of Woody Allen's movies have been nominated for the Oscar. Closer home this weekend, right? Bengali cinema, Indian cinema lost the giant Soumitra Chatterjee, Satyajit Ray's favorite actor. Soumitra Chatterjee's movie career was 59 to, in fact, the last movie he did was for my cousin. That was 2018. So nearly 60-year movie career, some 70 movies acted in. In addition, 12 books of poetry collections, 5 books of fiction, famous playwright, right? Creative powerhouses tend to have a very high output rate, right? You rarely will come across somebody who's creative and produces, one great book or one great idea once a decade, right? And the final driver of creativity, make friends, jam with other creatives, find allies, find people who can give you emotional support, intellectual support, and practical help. Now, it's always good to sort of, when one is talking about sort of an idealistic construct and how to juice up creativity, it's good to have an example, a persona who captures a lot of these traits. And Sanjeev Bikhchandani of InfoEdge the listed entity in InfoEdge, is, I think, a great example, right? We've known Sanjeev for a long time. He's my senior from school. We interviewed him for the book. The interview is in the Victory Project, right? Great example of how he created Naukri.com, then Zomato, then Policy Bazaar. All of these were created with very modest amounts of funding, right? This is not a Sanjeev didn't work on the pretext that a typical Silicon Valley a VC fund works, very austere, very frugal with its capital allocation, and yet the ability to produce outsized successes in industry after industry. And Naukri.com, from being non-existent in 1995, it's about to enter the Nifty, I reckon, in the next 2-3 years, right? So, an incredible example of a original thinker in India. Very iconoclastic thinker, and lots to learn from Sanjeev Bikhchandani. Let's now finish off the last element of the simplicity paradigm, probably the most critical element: collaboration. No matter how creative you are, right, if you want to change the world with your ideas, you need to learn how to influence other people and win their support for your cause. And as we research this subject, if you ask me, the biggest learning for us as authors was this whole aspect of collaboration and how central that is to outsized success. The greatest teams are teams of rivals, right? These are teams of diverse sets of individuals who might not agree with each other on almost any subject, but they come together to work towards a common goal. The most famous examples are Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War cabinet, which dragged America out of the ashes of the Civil War. Closer home, Mahatma Gandhi and India's first post-independence cabinet. Gandhiji brought together people like Sardar Patel and Baba Saheb Ambedkar, fierce political rivals, right? And he united them in the common cause of building the constitution which governs our lives to this day. Now, you see this collaborative aspect, bringing together disparate personalities, very different personalities, bring them together, put them in a common team. You see that very commonly in our world of investing. So Buffett and Munger famously in our country, Motilal Oswal ji and Ramdev Agarwal ji back in America, Soros and Druckenmiller, right? These partnerships are especially effective because you're bringing together different skill sets and diverse perspectives on the table. We've given in the book an example of collaboration on an epic scale, and that's Amul. So if you read Varghese Kurian's biography, I Too Had a Dream, he describes how in 1947, when he came back from America, Amul was basically non-existent. It was a small tin shed in a small town in Gujarat. From that to a company today which is 3x the size of Nestle India. If you look at it by top line, Amul is 3x the size of Nestle India. Nestle India's market cap is around $22 billion. So you can guess how big Amul would have been had it been listed. Amul is obviously the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, right? And if you look at how they function, right, they are basically procuring on a daily basis 2.3 crore liters of milk from 19,000 milk cooperatives, and underneath these 19,000 milk cooperatives are 36 lakh milk producers. So the next time you see the Amul butter on your table, just, it's a great metaphor for collaboration on an epic scale, ironically by a not-for-profit, right? And this part is very interesting, that collaboration doesn't necessarily have to be driven by money. The first post-independence cabinet did not collaborate for money. The people who are fueling Amul's relentless rise are not doing it for the money, right? And we've given another example in the book of collaboration not driven by great leader or for money. The Marwadi community in India, 9 million people. Outsized impact on GDP, obviously, right? 9 million people, but outsized impact on GDP. And this is an example of intense collaboration on a pan-India basis without a grand leader orchestrating the collaboration, right? And this aspect of the book, we found very interesting. If you ask me, we could write in just another book on this whole aspect. How do people in a society where you're taught, in our country, you're taught, it's you by yourself, you have to pass exams, you have to get jobs, you have to make loads of money. How do you flip that paradigm and go towards a collaborative paradigm? How do you realize that success in capitalism doesn't arise from the individual, it arises from collaborative enterprises? That's actually a very, very interesting flip. Some societies and some companies and some communities are able to pull it off. I gave you the paradoxical example of the Marwadi community. Others aren't, and that's to their detriment. It's a very interesting subject, something that I think we can do lots about later on. So let's move to investment implications. We are, after all, on Saket's webinar. So we're going to talk about investment implications. Simple investment ideas deliver remarkable results if implemented by a motivated and committed group of individuals, right? This aspect of success in the context of investing, the collaborative aspect deserves more focus. If I look back at my own career, right, almost all of my key investment insights have come from collaboration. In the Victory Project, I've narrated my personal experiences of meeting other thinkers for dinner, for drinks. And those experiences, those dinners, those meetings gave me the kernel of the ideas which now define Marcellus Investment Managers. So, for example, the idea behind starting the consistent compounder portfolio, or indeed the idea behind writing the book, Coffee Can Investing, came from reading Rob Kirby's 1984 paper by the same title. Now, I actually did not know about Kirby's 1984 paper. My friend Sanjay Bhattacharya told me in 2014 over dinner one evening. That set me towards the paper. Reading the paper gave me the idea for the book, and here we are sitting discussing how Marcellus invests money. Similarly, if you look at the American context, right? If you look at, say, John Bogle's idea of index funds, if you read Bogle's own biographies, he describes how it took him around 20 years of thinking to come up with the idea of the index fund. And created in 1976, Bogle's Vanguard today manages the best part of $6 trillion. I recently read in an SEC filing that Vanguard's current staff, right? Remember, this is the third generation of sort of Vanguardians, created in 76. So this is effectively the third generation of Vanguard staff. The current generation alone is worth $120 million in terms of Vanguard units owned by them, right? Just a simple idea which has created enormous wealth, obviously for the American investing public, but even for Vanguard's own staff. And so, and this point, right? We've covered it in the book, but I think this itself can be a subject of another book. How simple ideas, when put in a collaborative context, become extremely powerful, generate wealth, generate prosperity, and yet at the same time create a new paradigm which millions of people can follow, right? And we're trying our best in Marcellus to propagate this culture. But I think all of you out there, if you are investors, you work in investing firms, right? If you can, there's lots to be done around this subject. Collaboration and simplicity, the coming together, I think, is very powerful. So let me now move towards the final slides of the presentation. Right. For most of the last 8-9 years, we have tried to understand the drivers of greatness. So we began with corporate greatness. In the Unusual Billionaires, we profiled a set of unique companies that delivered outstanding financial performance year after year. We then took these guardrails of success. Anupam mentioned those guardrails, right? The guardrails of corporate success are double-digit revenue growth at a minimum every year, alongside return on capital above cost of capital. Those are the basic guardrails, right? You got to gun out return on capital above cost of capital. You got to gun out double-digit growth, right? We turned these simple guardrails into a book called Coffee Can Investing, which shows that how simply constructed portfolios can unlock significant financial gains, right? And finally, we now finish this trilogy of books with an overarching philosophy to live great lives. In spite of everything that's happened in the last 6-7 months to all of us, in spite of the various hurdles thrown at us by this great country, we believe all of us can live fulfilling lives by following the simplicity paradigm. So that's it from us. Thank you very much for giving us your time and your attention. Back to you, Saket.
Thank you, Anupam. Thank you, Saurabh, for that presentation. Now, like in terms of the various, I would say, the whole paradigm that you've covered, right from say the simplicity paradigm to say, you've talked about decluttering, so on and so forth. So this was again a question we had got in a little early in terms of like we'd asked the participants to this webinar to throw in their questions earlier. Like some of those questions had come in advance. So one of the questions was, how do you really I would say stimulate first principle thinking? So we've seen a lot of people talk about this, that okay, you bring original thoughts to the table, you talk about, so you've mentioned about the book written by Adam Grant as a great reference to that. But as a layman, how do you really stimulate first principle thinking, and how do you come up with, say, original thought? That was a question we had got beforehand.
I'll have a crack at it, and then I'll hand over to Anupam for his inputs on it. So obviously there is no, primer. At least I haven't found one. I haven't found a primer called The Bluffer's Guide to First Principles Thinking. It's a good book. Anybody out there can write it. I think that'd be a great book, The Bluffer's Guide to First Principles Thinking. Here's a few things which have helped us. So I mentioned the reading point. At least in my experience, right, and my experience both of meeting people in various countries and of reading other people's work, it's very rare to find an original thinker who doesn't read extensively, right? So it's very interesting, right? It's a paradoxical thing. The more you subject yourself to whatever is the reading, whatever is the current material out there, the more you bombard your mind with intellectual input, the more likely it is your mind will fire into life and come up with a genuinely original thought. The second thing seems to be cutting yourself off from sort of the daily discourse in social media. That seems to be a particularly the more you immerse yourself in the daily discourse in social media, right, rather than reading, the more you immerse yourself in the daily discourse in social media, the more you get anchored in consensus thinking, right? So again, very rare to come across original thinkers who are completely plugged into every social media platform, right? They could be doing it for propagating their ideas, as I do have to confess. I do put out material on LinkedIn, but I don't sort of use social media as this two-way street where I'm constantly looking at what people are saying about me, what people are saying about the subjects on which I'm writing, what is the latest thinking on value investing or on the Indian economy, right? So the desire to distance yourself from the crowd, I think, is a very powerful desire. The more interested you are in knowing what the rest of the world is doing and what they are thinking on the subjects you are interested in, the harder it becomes, I think, to be original. The third thing I found is original thinkers tend to have that support system around them, right? They tend to talk to each other a lot, right? So in Kolkata parlance, this is the coffee house culture, right? Where you go to College Street, you sit with coffees. I mean, as a child, I used to sort of romanticize it, but as an adult, I see the practical use of going to coffee houses and having long discussions. It's very difficult. It's very rare. It's very rare to have, say, if Anupam and I meet for coffee. By the way, this book was written primarily over lots and lots of coffee, right? I think I've lost count of how much coffee we drank whilst writing this book. But it's very rare for Anupam and I, for me to talk for half an hour without 5 original ideas hitting us, right? Now, that's the nature of original thought, right? You might not be able to do it shut in a room by yourself, but you meet a like-minded soul. He comes up with 5 ideas, I do. And famously, in the context of Bollywood music, R.D. Burman and Gulzar. So R.D. Burman famously used to reach out to Gulzar at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then R.D. Burman would drive from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. in his broken down car. And Gulzar and R.D. Burman would discuss, and thus would emerge famous Bollywood hits which have lit up our lives. So reading, cutting yourself up from mainstream sort of social media chatter, and then building a community of other creative, thoughtful, intellectually oriented people around you. If you do all 3, it'll be very difficult not to come up with original ideas. Anupam?
I can't possibly add to that. Just a couple of things from my side, Saket. I mean, if I were to use the market balance, then you have to figure out what's on the other side of the trade. If you're sitting on the side where the entire world is, then you're not contributing anything to yourself or to, you have to keep on constantly asking yourself what's on the other side of the trade. If the entire world is moving in a certain direction, then challenging consensus, shaking widely held beliefs, going against convention, all of this needs to be part of your thinking. You don't need to force yourself to do it. What Saurabh said, okay, you have 2 options. Social media as a positive and social media as a negative. We've written about this in the book also. I'm very active on Twitter. Saurabh isn't. There are a lot of other people. Professor Sanjay Bakshi, for example, very active on Twitter, and others aren't. So you need to be very clear why you are on social media. And social media is great as a source of content, provided you can curate it. So you need to figure out your sources of content, and that's it. Once you've cracked that, and we've given so many useful tips in the book that if you want to be an original thinker, I think the bare minimum is you need to challenge consensus, figure out what's on the other side of the trade, and build your life on a routine that helps you achieve that goal. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's a very fair point, both Saurabh and Anupam. Like in this today's day and age where we are seeing this whole new trend of a lot of people actually getting into social media influencing, be it, say, any platform you speak of. But it's, I mean, Anupam, you've like answered that very well in terms of as far as you know what your purpose is, and at the same time, you keep curating because in this world of algorithms and ads and everything, the more you keep curating, the more you keep decluttering, even in your, say, limited social media time usage.
And also, listen, I don't have any problem with influencers. The thing is
Yeah,
that the best influencers are probably great examples of the Victory Project. They're extremely good at what they do. I mean,
yeah,
you can just think of the top 3 or 4, and you'll figure out why their opinion influences you. And
yeah.
these are not random people posting content. So just yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, fair. I mean, yeah, what you said, that makes sense. So we've got a few questions. I mean, the question is for the panelists. So the first question is from Jacob John. He talks about holding quality stocks for a long term perspective, and like I think he's referring to you, Saurabh, where he says that after you buy a quality stock, when do you add in more? Should you wait for the price to go below your average cost? Or what if it doesn't and the price of the share bought is constantly moving up? So when or how do you add in more after doing the initial investment?
So the price has nothing to do, right? You neither buy looking at the price nor do you sell. And by the way, it's not just about stocks. Whether you're buying shirts, cars, flats, stocks, if you are looking at the price for the buying or the selling, that's your brain's way of telling you or telling me that I don't know enough about the product that I'm buying, right? So whenever you find yourself using price as a heuristic to guide your buying and selling, that's the brain's way of telling you stay away. You'll burn your fingers here, right? The price has nothing to do with whether you'll make money from a stock or not make money from a stock. So you buy the stock, as we've explained in our books and our webinars. Not the Victory Project, by the way. The Victory Project is not the book dedicated to the subject. If you want to understand this aspect of investing, buy the other books we've written. You buy a company on for three reasons. Firstly, the promoter is not a thief, which is very difficult in India. Very difficult to find companies in India where the promoter and the management are not pilfering from the company's coffers. Second is you look for companies who are selling products, services which are essential for day-to-day life in India. And the third thing is you look for companies who effectively don't have any competition, right? Obviously, the company itself will never come on TV or on a newspaper and say, I don't have competition. It's for you or for your fund manager to figure that out. So you buy a company on these three criteria: cleanliness, essentiality, and dominance. And you sell when these criteria, any one of these are compromised. Price should not be having a bearing on whether you're buying the stock or not buying the stock. If you're basing your investment decisions basis price, I think that's a recipe for a lot of trouble in our country. You can do that sort of thing in America, but my submission to you would be that's a recipe for trouble in our country.
Okay. One of the questions is from Mukul Agarwal. I think this question is for you, Anupam. He says that in one of the slides it was mentioned that Indians will give up 10% of their salary for job security. Request you to please elaborate on that.
Oh, that's based on a survey that we got. I mean, oh boy, come on, that's okay. See, now here's the thing, Saket. This is a generational thing. So my parents, for example, were people who worked in the PSU for 30, 40, 50 years. And that was a different India. This is a different India. So, and it's weird how this comes back in cycles, right? Because today people love job stability. They want job security. They want to stay in a job where they can probably take out the rest of their career. So that's the point that article is making, that you give me 100 rupees, but you give me a shaky job where I don't have any security, versus you give me 90 rupees and I know that I'm here for the next 5-10 years. I'll take that $90. So I think that's that's what we were trying to say out there, that mental health is now at a point where we're not sure about the jobs, instability, insecurity, all that stuff, layoffs, firing, etc. So that's the point that we were trying to make, that if we were to if we were to compromise remuneration, CTC, salary in exchange for stability, because we don't know that even if we are performing well, 1 year down the line, someone might just come and fire me. Why? Because somebody sitting in Hong Kong or the US saw a slide, pressed a button, Excel file opened and said, you got to cut costs. Boom, you're gone. So I think that was the point that slide was making.
All right. Fair enough. So the other question is, again, this question is a little anonymous for Saurabh. The attendee talks about, how do you get the idea to write? What is your motivation to write books? And what's your advice for the millennials who want to start writing? How can they go about it?
So the main reason for writing is actually to be part of this whole process of generating ideas, right? I mean, as I said, right, for all of us, every single person on this call, unless your mother, father are very wealthy and they have sort of set you up for life. For everybody else who's on this call and you're not set up for life, your success, my success, it fundamentally hinges on our ability to think originally, think about the world in a way that others can't think. Right now, if I tell myself every morning that I have to think in a way that others can't think, it's not very useful, right? I will just depress myself. But on the other hand, if I turn to people who I know are creative, intelligent, and I turn to them and say, ek saath kitab likhte hain, then it's a lot of fun, because then then you commit to the publisher that by X date we'll hand over the manuscript to you. So both of you know that there is a job at hand. We got to write this book. You talk to each other, you bounce concepts of each other. Anupam goes away, reads stuff, I read stuff. We go away and meet a bunch of interesting people, and that process generates the ideas, which puts food in my belly, right? So it's as existential as that. So yes, a book comes out, we publish the book, and thanks to people like you, Saket, we're able to tell the world about the book. But the ultimate benefit of the book is the whole process of writing the book. The process of writing the book gives us ideas which make us better professionals, better investors. I hope a better parent as well, but I say that softly, right? So it's like this is the simplest way I know of improving whatever skill set I have. You put yourself under the gun of a timeline set by a publisher. You work with one or two other people and try to come up with original, interesting insights on the world around us. And in the process, you learn, you improve your own clarity of thought, and that in turn allows you to be a better professional and earn money. Obviously, the other way to do it is, you work in some large company and you politic and you network and all of that bakwas, right? But that I lost faith in long time ago, right? So, networking means going in sort of these mixers and drinks events and 5-star hotels. That's the other way to do it. I find this a better way to come up with interesting ideas and move forward in life.
So I'll just add something to Saurabh. I mean, I know the question wasn't meant to me, and I'm extremely sorry for just putting in my, two cents. I think writing is a very logical conclusion to reading. Saurabh mentioned that every single person that we met for this book and who we put out there were readers. I don't know if Saurabh noticed, but almost all of them are outstanding writers. Whenever they do choose to pick up the pen and write something, okay, which someone like probably a Sanjeev Bikhchandani does not. But when you are reading, that is one part of the equation. When you're writing is when your clarity comes out. So if you look at, just look at Professor Sanjay Bakshi. His blog posts are legendary. You read one of them and, you're like,
Yeah.
why didn't I think of this?
Yes.
Okay, you look at Dr. Mark Mobius. I mean, just go on his website. He's not even a pedigree, education in. He doesn't have a pedigree education in finance. You look at Ramdevji. Whenever again, he's not someone who writes very often, but when he does, you'll find a kind of clarity that is not easy to get. People just think they can wake up in the morning, read the way, and by the evening they'll have a lot of stuff in their head. Writing is the logical conclusion to reading. I wish I could say more about this, but that's my perspective.
So I think everybody give yourself excuses to read loads, right? Give yourself excuses, reasons to read non-stop, and life will sort itself out. The more you spend sort of networking and social media, and it becomes challenging.
Yeah, kind of stems back to again the first point on first principles thinking, right? So a lot of times when you're writing, you get a lot of clarity, which maybe during the reading it doesn't sum up or conclude. And Anupam, as you mentioned, and I've written it down, writing is the legal conclusion to
It is
reading.
the one example that I forgot of was Manish Sabharwal. Oh, good Lord. He doesn't write much. But every column that comes out, of his.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Brilliant. Every column, every sentence is like a takeaway.
Yeah, and you can't have that clarity if you're not writing. The reading obviously is great on the input side. I mean, reading is necessary, and a lot of things. Writing just gives you that small edge in the end. I mean, just look at Saurabh, right? All his newsletters, all the stuff that he's written, that kind of clarity comes from reading. But if you don't write it, and Saurabh and me have discussed this a lot, that people who are extremely good at writing, very high chance that they're very, very good at reading also. Okay, so just putting the thought there.
Yeah. So the next question is from my economics teacher. He asks the question: is it really possible to control emotions while dealing with profits, and more importantly, with losses? Shall we become robots and go by books all the time?
I'm excluding myself here.
No, I think, look, it's doable. I mean, I'm not the only person in the planet who's saying this. It's doable. Others have done it. It's doable. It comes from a degree of disinterest in the profits itself, right? And a degree of disinterest in profits also comes from a degree of disinterest in wealth itself. And forget investors like us. I've seen it with many other promoters that we have written about, in whose companies we've invested in. So, for example, let's take a couple of examples of companies that we've invested in and we have written about. So, HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, Asian Paints, Berger Paints. I wrote about these companies in Unusual Billionaires broadly for the same length of time. We've had investments in the shares of these companies. The management team, not just the promoter or CEO, even the CFOs, the other CXOs, they genuinely don't miss a beat if the stock corrects 50%, 60%, or profits fall, or COVID happens. And I know these people very well now, right? They genuinely don't miss a beat. And I suppose what happens is, birds of a feather flock together, right? If you grow up in business, in investing, in corporate life with such people, you yourself become more level-headed. On the other hand, you sort of grow up with, panicky traders, speculators, arbitrageurs. They go through emotional roller coasters, and if you are constantly exposed to these traders and arbitrageurs, you yourself become a creature of fear and greed. So to put it in a cricketing context, and again, this is why in Unusual Billionaires and in Coffee Can Investing, we use Rahul Dravid as an example. The reason he was able to have a better average than Virender Sehwag in every form of cricket, Test cricket, ODIs, T20, and the reason his superiority in terms of average over Sehwag was better, the shorter the form of the game was, Dravid took emotion out of the equation as much as possible, right? And he turned it into a mathematical set of criteria that I will hit the ball when the ball is in these percentage type equations, the equivalent of Warren Buffett's fat pitch. The basic equivalent of Warren Buffett's fat pitch comes from Dravid in the cricket field. Now, he was subject to the same fears and greed that a cricketer has, right? Career, paisa, place in the team, run rate, scoreboard pressure. But this man was able to turn that whole circumstance through mental training, through meditation, through visualization techniques, through mental conditioning techniques, and working on his game, thinking about his game. There's a lot in Dravid's biographies about how he thought through problematic situations, how he figured out his weaknesses. He got dropped from the one-day cricket side in 1999-2000. He went back, he watched videos of himself, spotted his flaws, remedied them. That links to Ray Dalio wala comment in the spirituality chapter of Victory Project, right? If you're able to reflect on your own problems, your own issues, and you're able to self-diagnose कि क्या हो रहा है मेरे साथ, that is the most powerful skill that you can have as an investor. So I think in every walk of life, you will find a few people who've taken the emotional aspect out of the equation and done spectacularly well. Dravid is easy to spot in cricket. I would say to some extent Cheteshwar Pujara resembles Dravid, but I don't think he's quite there in terms of his ability to remedy his batting. In the investing context, Uday Kotak's capital allocation. Right, in the corporate context, Uday Kotak's capital allocation, Asian Paints' capital allocation, all portfolio stocks of Marcellus are very similar to this. They don't get carried away. India में सब NBFC खोल रहे हैं, मैं भी एक खोल डालता हूँ. India में सब AI और machine learning में घुस रहे हैं, मैं भी घुस जाता हूँ. Right? They don't do stuff like that. Nor do they say, "अरे COVID आ गया, सब कुछ बंद कर दो." Right? They carry on growing the business at a moderated pace. And if you expose yourself to these sorts of influences weekend after weekend through reading, you're more likely to become like that rather than the typical sort of fear and greed-driven frenzy that characterizes day-to-day life in any country.
Okay, we have another question on reading. So it's about how do you balance the reading time between reading specifically about, say, listed Indian companies, reports, their earnings, and general reading? Or in the initial years, is it important to read more about listed companies directly? So the question is more to do with, say, what exactly should be the priority of reading specifically for someone who's in investment management or doing investments?
So in my initial years, right, as an analyst, I started in the UK in 2003 as an analyst. So 2003 to 2008, those years in the UK when I was a full-time financials analyst, I used to start reading at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? So I used to take a train from home to work, and from 6 till say 8 in the evening when I used to get back home, it was pretty much non-stop, either reading annual reports or earnings transcripts or talking to primary data sources and the companies themselves. So those were the first 5 years of financial trading life. In Anupam's case, I think his years in CLSA, I suspect, were very similar. Right, full-on chartered accountant working in CLSA, he must have done the hard grind. Then, as I became a little bit more senior, I realized that the job profile changes. As you become more senior, your job is to then set the context for what the next generation of youngsters will read. So you can't then say, "I'm going to come to the office, I will read the Asian Paints annual report. Saket, tum bhi padho. You also read, I also read the same thing, and at tea time we'll have a chat." Right? So my job then becomes, once I became more senior, to say, let me now read about abstract stuff, the concepts behind investing, and then see if I can tell the next generation behind me how to implement the concepts. And thus came reading stuff like Kirby's 84 paper and the whole slew of stuff which led to the coffee can investing paradigm and the books around it, right? So my job became to look at the abstract and then give the team the concepts which they could turn into investing paradigms. And that's broadly where we are now. So I wake up at from 5 till 7. I read about what we own, what we have invested in, how are those companies doing. Our analysts, there are around 10 analysts in Marcellus. They write about what's happening inside the companies. We do a lot of forensic work on these companies. So I read our own investment research, which is for internal consumption, from 5 till 7. Then from 8 till around midday, we talk to each other. So we do these big Zoom calls or Teams calls. We talk to each other. Each person shares their thoughts on the portfolio. From 12 till say around 5 o'clock, I do client calls and I have lunch. And then ideally from say this part of the day till say 11 o'clock, I'll read stuff again about variety of things. So I'll go back to reading Dravid now. Uske baad I'll order Terry Smith's new book, a big hero of mine. So I've ordered Terry Smith's new books. Then I do something which only geeks do. I think about what I will read next. So I sit with 3 books. I'll say, kya sequence hai? And so that's how I typically, so from 6-7 in the evening till sleeping is you try to avoid finance reading and go into non-finance reading. But ideally, in an ideal world, full day will be just reading about the stocks we have invested in, our investment research, our forensics, and reading our analyst work, and the rest of the day reading about other people from other walks in life all across the world who've walked down this path of intense thought, mental conditioning, meditation, original thought, the kind of the demotion of emotion, and the primacy of rational thought, right? And there are plenty of people in the world who've done it. There's no point my reinventing the wheel. If my colleagues and I just read that non-stop, we'll be good.
So, Anupam, I think there's a question for you. The question is, from an investor point of view, how does one begin to unlearn and subsequently relearn better concepts? Seeing as unlearning is the hardest part for an investor. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, you just take a few concepts that you think that you strongly believe in because of stuff that you hear around. And you just pick it all apart one by one. Let's take, let's take rent versus buy. One of the most famous conversations that we have with each other. I've spoken about it on my podcast also. And obviously, on the face of it, rent versus buy, when it comes to the property that where you want to stay, it's a no-brainer. You've got rental yields at 2%, interest rates at 7%. It's absolutely a no-brainer. But what if someone actually has a few emotional criteria that he believes that make a strong case for buying? For example, he's not going to leave the city. He's got a fairly stable and a stable and a good job, and he believes that he wants to own a property. See, that's the thing about a house. It's too emotional than it is financial. So I'm saying build a case, examine it on its merits, and if you'll find that every financial decision has a huge emotional aspect to it. So I think unlearning is unpacking these decisions around investment into various parts. And we've spoken about this in the book also, because there's behavioral finance also in that, and identifying which is playing really a big role. And you will find this in virtually all debates: value versus growth, tech stocks versus this versus that, utilities, cyclicals, growth, technology, whatever it is. So that's one big aspect of it. That how do you unlearn is how open are you to questioning your own beliefs, and then finding a rational way to understanding the other side, and then you keep on changing what you think. Of course, the other side of the debate, and what we've written in the book and what Saurabh also believes in, is just having a checklist and having rules. That's just about it, and not diverting at all from it. What we spoke about, 10% sales year after year, 15% ROEs. So that's as simple as it can get. So once you've got that framework, unlearning could then take the form of drilling down each and every company that meets that criteria and looking at it from all possible different angles. So unlearning what you've learned is actually a process. It's very deeply connected to creativity and original thinking. Saurabh, any thoughts out there?
Again, I think this whole process of learning and unlearning, right? A lot of it can happen through reading. The challenge that I see, right, with most people, including myself, is our brains tend to get so distracted and fragmented. A lot of people, myself included, struggle to concentrate, right? And unless you really sort of master your willpower, you struggle to finish books, right? Most people, I'm sure, on this Zoom call face the same predicament I face. You struggle to finish books, and you read 5-10 pages, then you start going trawling the net and so on, right? And this problem is especially acute for those who read on iPads, because वो Kindle off करके फिर चालू हो जाओ net पे surf करना. So this it is hard, but I think it's very powerful. It's generally becoming a superpower now. If you're able to concentrate on books and slam through them in a day or 2 days, you can chug through a book. The amount of neural networking that happens because you're reading book after book after book is like a gymnast going to the gym and working out year after year on his or her body, right? You will see the difference, right? That body, the biceps, the physical conditioning will change. The same thing with the brain. The same thing with the brain. You feed your brain trash, which is, chota articles, normal tweet. You feed your brain trash, your brain will become like a obese body, right? Just like junk fooded body, right? You feed your brain, high quality intellectual material year after year. Your brain, we've got trillion neurons in our head. Apparently, each of us has some trillion neurons in our head, and the more densely networked those neurons are, the more powerful your brain is. And each of us can enhance our brains further. And effectively, as is famously known, what Buffett and Munger have done is over 60 years done this so intensively that their brains have gone to a different planet. But as Anupam said, those are celebrated people. हमारे देश में भी लोगों ने किया है. Same thing has happened in India. The Indian ones are less celebrated, and hence the Victory Project celebrates, rightly so, people like Manish Sabarwal, people like Sanjeev Bikhchandani, people like Apurva Purohit of Radio City, people who are also voracious readers, but unki reading less celebrated. But the clarity of thought that comes from heavy duty reading, the mental muscle that comes is evident in the discourse that we were able to have with them, which is put in the book.
So one thing, Saket, that I want to point out that to help with this thing of not finishing, I think what helps me tremendously is notes. And if you're on a Kindle, highlighting, is out there. Just take notes as aggressively, as madly as possible when you're reading a book. Highlight. Number one, at the end of the book, read all those highlighted sections all over again. Number two, go to and this is a very simple hack. I mean, it is so simple that it's, go to the reference material and sources that are typically in the index of the book and get some ideas from there. And then follow a line of thinking when you're reading your books. Like if, for example, for me, corporate history is a big thing for me. So that day I was actually watching this Tamil movie called Surarai Potru, which is based on Captain Gopinath's entire experience on building what a movie though, on building a low-cost airline, right? And I've already read Simplify because I had read it as part of, I don't know which book it was, because thanks to Saurabh and the work that we did at Ambit, I've lost track of the sheer amount of literature there is out there on Indian history. So seeing that movie then makes me go back and read the entire book all over again, makes me see the notes, and then your memory it's all there in your memory. Okay, so number one, finish what you're reading always. That goes without saying. Number two, take notes aggressively. Handwritten are best, highlighted good enough. And number three, finish a train of thought. I think that's what I would say helps.
So on notes, so this is how I take notes. I have this little parchi. Every time I read a book, I have this parchi. So I don't know whether you guys can see it. So I put Dravid, then I put key characteristics, right? So after reading the book for 15-20 minutes, आप समझ जाते हो कि author ने what are the key themes around which the book has been authored. So you jot them down. And then you write page references, right? So you write page references, ki page 46 mein ye hua, page 47 mein. So for example, I've written that meticulous attention to detail, page 8, page 46, page 48, right? Then I've said ability to deal with pressure and ability to use visualization techniques, right? Ability to use mental visualization techniques to deal with pressure. वो कौन से pages में reference है, right? So then when I finish the book, right? So what does it do? One, it makes you stay awake through the book. So क्या होता है? You'll just drowse off. If you keep saying मैं scribble करता रहूँगा, what are the key themes, right? It makes the book that much more interesting. So when you finish the book, right? I stick this parchi to the book, so that when I come back to the book, say a year from now, and I just want to focus on Dravid and visualization techniques, right? मेरे को भी करना है सबसे. I then say, मेरे को पता है that page 46, 49, and 82 will tell me how Rahul Dravid used to use meditation and visualization techniques to create a frame of mind so that he would not get flustered regardless of what the opposition does to him, right? And you can see, right, if he can do it in the middle of, say, Eden Gardens with 1 lakh people watching and 1.4 billion people watching on TV, then hopefully in our more modest jobs we should be able to do it as well. So there are books on how to read a book. There's literally a book called How to Read a Book, but it's increasingly becoming a superpower, which is obviously great for everybody on this Zoom call, because if you can read and others can't, then thoda sa comparative advantage is there only.
Yeah, and here is Simplify on my Kindle app. You can have a Kindle on your mobile also, and the same mobile that you do Twitter and WhatsApp on, you can read a lot of books here. So, all I'm trying to say is that it all depends on your approach in life.
So this is again something which both of you have addressed in the book, where you talk about taking notes a lot of times, which kind of helps you preserve that train of thought or keep thinking. Now this is somewhere where I also personally struggle is how do you like develop a system? Like sort of you mentioned that say if you want to think of going back to say Dravid and understanding that these were the things you read, you'll just refer to that note. So a lot of times I've seen a lot of people also struggle with keeping a train of thought. So while I remember like when I was in so I was into stand-up comedy for about 4 to 5 months, and that involved a lot of writing. So I had a notebook where I used to write it. And every day after the show, I would just revisit it. Okay, this worked, this didn't work. And I used to keep filtering it out. But how do you do that when, say, if you're reading or say if you're in a day job? I mean, you can have Evernote on your phone, you can have Google Keep on your phone, right? But how do you keep recycling, or how do you kind of
I'll just
make an impact?
I'll let Saurabh, give the bulk of this. I just want to relate to a few anecdotes of my life when I used to be a sell-side analyst. This is in the 2000s. At that point of time, the kind of, the best fund managers that I used to meet, that I was very lucky to meet, thanks to my firm, were people who used to carry these gigantic notebooks. And this would be like, I don't know where they used to get these notebooks from, those school wala 500-page notebooks. And these guys had every visit note with every company written down out there. And their sheer ability to sit through every meeting and write down what everybody was writing. And I know that Saurabh also does it till date. So when you're with someone, so the ability to recall is just a function of your span of attention and how much you're present during that meeting. And these guys they loved what they do. They just loved what they do. So when they're going to meet a promoter regarding anything, a routine meeting, a special meeting, a broker meeting, it's already there in the memory. So developing your memory to absorb a lot of information and then putting it in all various parts of your brain and then recalling them at will. All of this is part of a routine that we've discussed in the book. So I'll let Saurabh talk more about it because he knows this more than me.
So I think Anupam is right? So we've discussed in the book how some of the most celebrated Western classical music was composed by people like Mozart. They basically carried the chords in their head. I think chords pe shuru hota hai, they add the other things. My kids understand music better than I do, but they explained it to me, and this Doris Wallace Howard Gruber book on creativity explained that to come up with the celebrated pieces of music that Mozart is known for 5 years, he would carry the tune in his head, and he would look for other influences which would help him enhance the tune. Right. So he's doing it with music. We are doing it with books. Right. We're also doing it with books. Why? Because we want to become better investors. Right. So you have an end goal in mind, which in my case, I want to become a better investor. The Via Media is writing good books. To write good books in turn, you have a skeletal structure in mind. You have a broad framework in mind, and then you fill up that framework with good stuff as you meet other intelligent people who give you good insights, and you fill it up with material you've read elsewhere. And in that process of doing so, you hit upon one or two original thoughts, which you also capture in the book. Now, the process of turning verbal into written, thankfully, has become quite easy because of software. So for the interviews that we did with Victory Project, the transcription, we used some transcription software. So we told the interviewee that hum aapko record kar rahe hain, and then recording, there will be some transcription software that the research assistant Mukti, who helped us on this book, she and Anupam would hit the transcription software, and the interview would get transcribed automatically. But then to turn that transcribed interview into a interesting 1,000-word essay, either Anupam or I would have a crack at it, and therefore you had the original meeting where we learned good stuff. Then you read the transcript, and then from the transcript you distill out 1,000 words which are worth the attention of people who are on this call today. So say that's pretty intense learning, right? Because that then jams that thing that's part of your memory for a long time to come, and that memory might help you 10 years later, right? Whilst the Kirby book helped me, the Kirby paper helped me 90 and reading it in 2014, the insight which I linked to that was linked to my betting shop days in the UK in 94. So 94, when I learned something at the betting shop about how smart punters think, I linked that with what Kirby told me, and then Bharat Shah ji of ASK then told me something else in 2014, right? Khat, teen cheeze link ho gayi, and thus came Unusual Billionaires.
I'll just add one point here, what Saurabh said, that so the software was the dumb part actually. That transcription was all fine. When I was sitting and writing the essay, guess what? So I would have heard entire conversations on audio at least 2 to 3 times. Okay, the first time was just to match it with the text because it is software. It's not going to get. And when your guest goes into talking Hindi, the software bhi gaya phir uske baad. So that's that would be the first listen. And second would be fact checking. Okay, because a lot of people just you have passionate people when they talk, they love to talk. Sometimes they make some statements, you want to fact check that. And third is when you're actually writing the essay. Let me give you an example of how insightful this was. So we were sitting with Manish Abarwal. Now, this is a person who references every third, fourth sentence that he says is from a reference. Okay, so he started off with quoting Paracelsus on the dose makes the poison. Okay, so when I reheard that, I said, okay, dose makes the poison. So DOORS. What's a door got to do with poison? Okay. And then finally, when I did all my digging checking, it turns out that Paracelsus is a Renaissance physician. And the exact quote was the dose, DOSE, makes the poison. And if you Google that, you'll get the perspective. It's all about balance. So there's a lot of, joy that you get when you do something like this.
Great. So I think we're done with most of the questions. There are 2 questions left, and these are specifically related to investments. And Saurabh, they've been addressed to you. The first question is around if the decision, so for example, so I think the framework that you've talked about in the Unusual Billionaires and also in the coffee can investing about ROCE being greater than 15% and your revenue growth being higher than 10%. What do you do when any of these change? Do you withdraw the investment even if it is at a loss, or do you continue to hold it waiting for a turnaround?
I don't know if we've lost Saurabh out there, but I'll just fill in because this is from the coffee can portfolio. Actually, we had when we had originally written this, there were 2 things that we did. We ran portfolios without change. So if you have a portfolio that starts say in the year 2010 and ends in 2020, because these are 10-year portfolios, they ran 2 back tests. One is when you keep churning. So say the previous 10 years holds true, but in the next year, one company doesn't satisfy that. So then that company falls out. It turned out that even if you held on to that company, then that portfolio is still good enough. Because the portfolio has it has a balancing mechanism whereby each stock that does actually really well goes on to become a fairly large weight in that portfolio, and the stocks that are not doing well automatically reduce to a lower weight. So at a portfolio level, a very good chance that even if you're holding on to that company, the portfolio will still do well. But obviously, if a stock does not satisfy that certain criteria, if I remember correctly, that would move out of the portfolio. But you're talking about a company that has given these kind of stellar returns over a 10-year period. So for that to just stop suddenly does not happen, in the middle of nowhere. There would probably be a pattern. So I don't know if Saurabh is coming back or not. I'll just ping him. If you can just hold on for a bit.
Sure. And I think just to add to that, there were 2 more things. One was there was mention, I remember Nestle was a part of that CCP, and where you're taken a specific exclusion for when the Maggie ban happened, just to get over that revenue growth threshold. And the second thing was where Pranav makes a point that even if you consider a CCP with 2 companies and one company say goes to 0, and the second one, say,
Yeah.
outperforms, as a portfolio, it will still beat the index.
That goes back to the original CCP. That article is so the original the Kirby article is actually there. We've referenced it in the book. If you just do a Google search, you'll get a PDF download. I think it came in the CFA journal or somewhere. That here's what the original story was. So I think Capital Group was advising a certain client, and the client's wife was front running that portfolio. Not front running is the wrong word, just matching the same portfolio. The only difference that the wife did was that when these guys would advise the client to change stocks, she would not change. Okay, so she actually held on to duds and she held on to big stocks. And at the end, when they took out, the portfolio and saw what worked was exactly that. You had some massive, some big names at that point of time. Kodak used to be big, that did really, really well in the portfolio, and some that just totally shrunk and vanished. So that is a case of someone who held on to that original portfolio of stocks.
Great. So Anupam, I've heard you on the Capital Mind podcast where you spoke about just getting your SIPs, letting your SIPs continue, or seriously topping up, say when you get a bonus or when you have additional cash flow, which maybe may not seem like a great thing to do considering the noise and chatter you hear all around. But over a 10-year, 15-year period, it actually ends up making serious money for you, right? That was your point. Now, to this, there's a question that so there are two age profiles that are being talked about. Prabhu asked this question. The first question is, my parents who are 70 plus, they wish to invest around 30 lakhs lump sum, which would give them some assured returns. And the second question is, I'm 45, I am employed in the private sector, and I have about 50 lakhs to invest. What, where, how should I plan my investment? So what are your thoughts on that?
I say, first of all, I'm not an advisor. I'm just a podcast host. And far be it from me to tell someone, who's a 70-year-old and has 30 lakhs, massive amount of money. I'm not going to do any advice out there. The other guy. So I'll just bounce this back to Saurabh. Honestly, assured returns is great in the sense that it's, that's our Indian mentality that's out there. But I'm not an advisor. I will have to recuse myself out here. If I should probably give my exams and get that RIA certificate in, but I can't. I'll just let Saurabh take this question. And also, Saket, if you can just have the previous question clarified since Saurabh is out here.
So sorry about that, Saket. I had to take a call from...
no issues. You can answer this question
on some regulatory change. So whilst we're on the regulator, I did pass my RIE exams 2 years ago. The second part is a little tricky. And in Coffee Can Investing, in the book Coffee Can Investing, Low Risk Route to Stupendous Wealth, we have answered both the questions that the gentleman has posed, or lady has posed, which is, what should your parents do? What should you do? Both the questions have been answered. Broadly speaking, the advice is put aside 3 to 5 years of rainy day money and take the rest of it and invest in a mixture of, depending on what you have faith in, index funds, CCP type products, and a good small cap fund. Right now, a lot of people have a lot of skepticism about small cap funds. They say it's an oxymoron in India to say a good small cap fund. I'm not as cynical. In the mutual fund community, I reckon there are a couple of good small cap funds. In the PMS world as well, there are a couple of good small cap funds. I do admit it is hard to find these, but they are find outable. So Coffee Can Investing gives you both worked examples of this. It also gives you a template that you can follow to do your own wealth planning. In the Victory Project, we've also given a couple of examples of wealth planning, but the examples are more detailed in Coffee Can Investing. And furthermore, if you go to the SEBI website, and look for RIAs, there's a whole telephone directory of RIAs, their names, their phone numbers, their email addresses. These are people you can pay a small fee to and get advice done. So it's very accessible, worth doing. It'll help you and your parents. And preceding question, what was it, Saket?
So the preceding question was around CCP. So one of the viewers had posted a question: what do you really do? Say, so on the two parameters that you've put forward in the Unusual Billionaires as well as in the Coffee Can Investing, revenue growth 10%, ROC above 15%. what do you do when one of those parameters gets challenged in a year? So while Anupam and I,
so as we have said in both books, right? Um, uh, if you want to run the portfolio as mechanically as that, 1 year it fails and you drop it out, you can do it. The book does it. The book does it very mechanically, and yet the book blows the index out of the water, right, by a long way. So the book mechanically does it. So Asian Paints fails for 1 year, usko nikal do, and until Asian Paint does 10 consecutive years of double-digit rev growth and ROC above cost of capital, don't bring it back. So you can do it mechanically. The book does it mechanically, and it still beats the living daylights out of both the index and any mutual fund in our country. What we do in Marcellus is we apply our judgment and say, why did it fail? So, for example, in 2016, the year when the Maggie fiasco happened, that year Nestle's revenue growth was 2%. Right? So obviously it failed the double-digit revenue growth test. So it was up to us to say, is there something fundamentally wrong with Nestle, which leads us to believe that it's an inferior company and we should dump it? Or was the Maggie fiasco an exogenous event which does not give us any meaningful information about the quality of Nestle's franchise? Our judgment led us to believe it was the latter, and we ignored the signal that year. Similarly, I think 2016 or 2017, crude prices fell from some $120 to $30. Because crude prices fell by utna, right, 75%, Asian Paints naturally cut its prices, right, because crude is a big raw material. Because it cut its prices that year, Asian Paints' revenue growth was in double digits. Now, should we then say now Asian Paints is out of the portfolio for 10 years, or should we again say, like the Maggie fiasco, this is an exogenous event, and we should not judge the company because of this? So similarly, COVID this year, right? This year, revenue, I think ROC to all our companies would have met. On revenue growth, some of our companies didn't meet the double-digit rev growth formula because of COVID. Should we now throw them out for the next 10 years? So what we try to do in practical, in consistent compounders is use our judgment on why was the filter failed. Did the filter miss because of an exogenous event, or was it endogenous to the company? If it's endogenous to the company, then we are likely to exclude it. If it was, as was the case with your erstwhile employer, if it's exogenous to the company, then we are more likely to be forgiving.
Fair enough. I think this is again broadly what Anupam had spoken about, and we did refer to the Maggie event that you had mentioned in the book. Right. And the other thing,
all of this is, by the way, all of this stuff is free on the Marcellus website. So if you don't have to be a client, you just go and put your mailing address. It'll come to your inbox a couple of times a week. You'll get all our emailers, webinars, etc. And you can gorge yourself on the material without having to pay anybody anything.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up most of the questions we've had. If there are any concluding thoughts, Anupam, Saurabh, I leave it up to you.
No, yeah, nothing from me. I think the book kind of just captures everything really well.
So read the book, folks. It's a lot of work to write these things. It's 2 years of lots of weekends, lots of evenings taken up. So read the book. If you like it, please recommend it to others. Thanks to advances in technology, you don't even have to go to the bookshop. But if you do, it'll be good for the bookshops. I think we do need to look after the bookshops in our country. They are treasure houses of knowledge. So I do whatever I can to patronize my local bookshop. Take my bachas there whenever they are up for it. The bachas are unfortunately part of the next generation. They treat me like an online bookstore. They say ye chahiye leke aa jao. Right, so I'm trying my best to create the culture. Please, if you have bookshops near your house, please patronize them. If you buy our book, good for it. But even if you don't buy something else, that's also brilliant.
And if you do buy a book, please leave us a rating and a review on Amazon. Really helps us.
Okay, thank you, Saket. Thanks for hosting us. Very kind of you to do this.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye for now.